Thank you so much for sharing that and for being with us today. As we talked about earlier, we wanted to talk about centering culture and community engagement. So what I would love for each of you to speak to is, what does it mean to you to center culture and community engagement? And when doing so, what identities are you drawing from? Bilal, would you like to start?
Sure. Wow, we were just talking about this. I was talking about the importance of listening. Well, I feel like I feel bad starting because I think this resonates across the panel. As I think of myself as a refugee, as coming from family who has had to have multiple instances of being a refugee, moving due to war and kind of tumultuous governments and societies around them, and coming here to a place that is likely to embrace or feel more, just a bit more comfort with a queer identity. There is this huge imbalance in intersectionality that you just have to be aware of, and tapping into that intersectionality and the kind of highlighting of multiple kind of experiences that are exclamated in a society that the dominant doesn't relate to, kind of creates a assimilation mindset and an awareness mentality, and so I guess that just causes me to tap into others without a bit of assumption. But I'll stop there because I think others have really kind of similar experiences. You want to just go down the line?
Sure. It's kind of a broad topic, and we didn't have a lot of time to think about it. But similarly, I think that the identities that I'm drawing from are queer and BIPOC and country or rural, whichever you prefer. And those identities sometimes were misinterpreted or misunderstood or just plain not respected. And so I think for me, it's kind of a attitude of empathy and trying to understand where folks are coming from, and accepting folks as they are, and all the work that I do, the organizations that I'm connected to, those are all organizations that draw off the power of by and for.
So, in terms of the identities that I draw from personally, I draw from my identity as the daughter of immigrant parents who came from Thailand, and having grown up in the Midwest and really at a time and in a culture of assimilation. So I draw from really a sense of loneliness as an immigrant family in a community where we were it. There wasn't a larger community that we were a part of. But in terms of my work at Voices for Racial Justice, I think I'll just share with you a story, I guess, about some work that we did several years ago. It was the Voices for Voting Rights campaign in 2012. If you'll remember the campaign to defeat the voter ID amendment. And I think of that work that we did then as kind of a turning point in our organization, because we did what we always do. We brought a multiracial, multicultural group of partners together to think about, what do we do? What is the story? What is the narrative in this work, in this campaign? And what is being missed in sort of the broader progressive campaign to defeat that amendment? And what we were hearing was the stories, exactly what we're talking about today, the sense of culture and identity, and how different communities experience the experience of being in a democracy differently. And what we learned through that, we did a video narrative campaign and worked in different communities. And as I went around with the film crew and recorded those stories, I could see that the experience of being in this country, the experience of participating in a democracy really was different for everybody. That for African Americans coming from this horrible history of slavery, of generations fighting for voting rights, fighting to belong in this country, and then facing the prospect of this voter ID amendment, was a different experience from Native communities that were telling us that they hold in tension the experience of voting. They hold in tension participating in a democracy that has stolen from their communities. So it was just really eye-opening and interesting to slow down and simply listen, and then to elevate those stories in that process. And I think of that as framing how we do our work in community, and how community engagement really has to be the grounding for everything that we do. And it's hard. We were able in that campaign to come together around a particular, very clear purpose of defeating that amendment. We're about to enter into some work that's somewhat similar around the 2020 census. And I can tell you that is not a clear narrative for us to get around. I mean, we can't promise to our partners anything, any kind of result or safety as a result of participating in the census. So I think a lot of it has to do with the nuances of the context, and definitely the nuances of different experiences that people have in community.
So laughingly, I want to say that as an Irish descended lass, that I like to bring the pub culture into my efforts to facilitate community engagement and, sort of create that sense of belonging and the small conversations that surface really juicy things that we could do together. But I also know that I, like Angie, walk in the world with a whole bunch of privilege as a white woman. And so often what is in my head and my heart when I am designing or planning community engagement is this: how can I show up and not perpetuate white supremacist culture? How can I show up in ways that are humble, with curiosity, and that disrupt those systems and create opportunities for people to be heard in different ways than usually happens? That's the short answer.